Good day, everyone. Welcome to Jamovi for Educational Research Tutorial Series, Ep.5, Independent Samples T-Test. What is Independent Samples T-Test? The Parametric Independent Samples T-Test, also known as Student's T-Test, is used to determine if there is a statistical difference between the means of two independent groups. The test requires a continuous dependent variable and an independent variable comprising two groups. Here are the assumptions of the Parametric Independent Samples T-Test. Group independence. Both groups must be independent of each other. Normality of the dependent variable. The dependent variable should also be measured on a continuous scale and be approximately normally distributed with no significant outliers. Homogeneity of variance. The variances of the dependent variable should be equal in each group. A researcher wants to determine if exposure to a certain intervention or the independent variable has an effect on the chosen dependent variable by comparing the means of the control and experimental group, provided that the assumptions of normality using Shapiro-Wilks test and homogeneity of variance using Leavitt's test were met. Here's the sample situation. Teacher Mario wants to determine the effect of an online formative assessment tool, which is the intervention, on self-efficacy of students. He selected one section, which is the experimental group, in which he will implement the use of online formative assessment tool, and another section in which no intervention will be given. At the end of one quarter, he administered an instrument measuring student self-efficacy for learning in both groups. Here are the tasks that we will go through in this tutorial. Perform the test, check the assumptions, interpret the results, report the analysis. Once your dataset has been successfully imported, you're now ready to perform the test. So make sure to keep your focus on the process. Let us now begin. When it comes to interpretation of results, these are the parts that you have to pay attention to. For the independent samples t-test results, always look at the p-value, which should be less than 0.05 for it to be significant. Effect size is also a must check since it helps us understand the magnitude of differences found, whereas statistical significance examines whether the findings are likely to be due to chance. So since we're dealing with the difference between two means, we are using Cohen's d. Here's a guide for interpreting effect size for t-tests of means. If you got 0.2, the effect size is small. 0.5, the effect size is medium. And if it's 0.8, the effect size is large. For the normality test, as you can see, there is a note below the table stating that a low p-value suggests a violation of the assumption of normality. To meet this assumption, you should obtain the p-value of greater than 0.05. If you get less than 0.05, it means that the assumption for the test of normality is violated. The same with the homogeneity of variance. To be able to meet this assumption, the p-value obtained must also be greater than 0.05. If it violates the assumption for homogeneity of variance, although it doesn't violate the assumption for normality test, use Welch t-test for an equal variance. If it happens to violate the assumption of normality, even if it doesn't violate the assumption for homogeneity of variance, use its non-parametric counterpart or alternative, which is the man-Whitney-U test. For the descriptive statistics, you should report the values for mean and SD or standard deviation. This analysis report follows the APA format, provided with the tables of results for inferential statistics, descriptive statistics, and the assumption for normality test and homogeneity of variance. This is how you should report the analysis in order. Take note of the terms in blue font and the format of reporting values in red font. The study aims to determine the effect of the online formative assessment tool on student self-efficacy for learning. The self-efficacy for learning was measured using Self-Efficacy for Learning Form, Abridged, by Zimmerman and Kilshantes 2007. Prior to conducting the analysis, the assumptions of independent samples t-test, which are normality and homogeneity of variance, were examined using Shapiro-Wilk statistics and Levine's test, respectively. The result of Shapiro-Wilk test showed that the assumption of normality was not violated, represented by the given values, and the result of Levine's test indicated that the assumption of homogeneity of variance was also not violated, represented by the given values. The result of independent samples t-test reveals that there is a significant difference between the self-efficacy for learning of students in the experimental group and control group, represented by the given values. There is a medium effect size for this analysis with a Cohen's d value 0.61. The findings suggest that online formative assessment tool has a significant effect on student self-efficacy for learning. That ends this session. Thank you for watching Jamovi for Educational Research tutorial series. Stay tuned for the next episode. See you next time.